I've had a number of collectors reach out to me about, while we're on tour, if I have time to stop by and see their collections. Their collections are quite different than the collections that you probably normally see. These people collecting very specialized boutique guitars, you know.
Yeah, I hate that kind of collecting. I think it's just...
Are we rolling yet, Zach?
Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. I'm your host, Jamie Gale. Today I'm speaking with someone whose name is synonymous with vintage guitars and collecting, George Gruhn. Since opening Gruhn Guitars in 1970, George has become the go-to authority for everyone, including the biggest names in guitar like Eric Clapton, Gill and Paul McCartney, and frankly, anyone who wants to understand the soul of a great instrument. George changed how we think about guitars, not just as tools, but as cultural artifacts with stories and lineage. In this conversation, we dive into the psychology of collecting, the evolution of guitar design, and the shifting motivations behind why we treasure these objects. This isn't just a chat about gear. It's about history, identity, and the power of art that sings with you. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with George Gruhn, and I hope that you do as much as I did.
I've had a number of collectors reach out to me about, while we're on tour, if I have time to stop by and see their collections. Their collections are quite different than the collections that you probably normally see. These people collecting very specialized boutique guitars, you know.
Yeah, I hate that kind of collecting. I think it's just...
Are we rolling yet, Zach? Oh, good, because I want that response. Well, what did you ascertain so much by me just saying that they're collecting specialized boutique guitars?
Well, my experience with boutique guitars is, in general, they're extremely hard to sell. And most of them, but not all, in my opinion, are not equal in quality to the vintage guitars by some of the major manufacturers. A lot of the boutique guitars are heavy on ornamentation, but not necessarily truly great structural, functional design. Simply having the statement that it's totally handmade by one luthier does not automatically guarantee that it's better.
Oh, I agree.
The old Martins had a great deal of hand work, but they were still manufactured in a factory setting, although it was certainly very different than the current type factory setting. There were no CNC machines and no computers, and there were power tools going back even as far as in CF Senior's tenure. They did get a steam engine, and it had belts that would run around and could power equipment, which were often, by today's safety standards, not so good. You could get caught up in a belt, or you could have exposed whirling blades. It used to be said that if you could tell pretty well how long somebody had been employed at Gibson by counting fingers. But it also meant that a fair number of their employees were exempt from the draft in World War II, because if you were missing a finger, they didn't take you. But at any rate, I think first and foremost, and what makes a guitar or any other item good, is design, functional design. Second is structural workmanship, which needs to be strong to withhold or withstand the tension of strings, because a set of medium gauge strings has pretty close to, it's over 150 pounds of string tension on that instrument, pushing up on the bridge and or down on the bridge if it's an arch top, pulling upward on the bridge and torquing the top if it's a flat top. Different design totally, and also a lot of tension on the neck. And if it's not built to withstand all of that tension, it will fall apart. And if it's built too strong, so it will absolutely not have any way to warp, it may not have flexibility enough to drive the top to produce a good acoustic sound.
Right.
So at least on an acoustic guitar, there is a constant struggle between getting excellent sound, good vibration, and also good structure to not fall apart. And one of the things I can look at even on vintage instruments, my father was a pathologist. I can look at the geriatric problems that some of these instruments have, and sometimes you can see ways that you could have fixed it. In the human body, the pathologist can't figure out how to fix the structure of the human body so that things don't wear out. Like our teeth, bones can regenerate over time. Teeth don't. And it's a flaw in a lot of mammals, except that from an evolutionary standpoint, when they get well past reproductive age, doesn't give you any evolutionary advantage to live longer. But with guitars are designed so with proper design and care, you can have guitars playable 200 years later. And we have plenty of guitars over 100 years old that are in fine condition. But, so first and foremost, design. Second, structural workmanship. Third, materials. Fourth, ornamentation. On a lot of the boutique guitars, the fourth one is the big one.
Can be.
It's ornamentation on a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, as I look around this room, I see a lot of ornamentation in vintage guitars also.
True,
Right.
but in general on the vintage ones, the structural integrity is really good because the ornamented ones have essentially the same construction as their mid-grade models or even their low models. On Martin, the workmanship was uniformly excellent.
Yeah, you're not going to get any argument from me on this matter. I mean, in a factory production, we can refine the systems. When it fails, you have lots of volume of instruments to figure out the fail point and improve it. Failure's expensive. If you're around long enough, you need to get rid of failure points because they cost you money.
Well, especially if you have a lifetime warranty.
Right, and so I certainly agree. And one of the risks for any artisan guitar maker, especially the extremely artistic ones that refuse to make the same guitar twice, is that there's never any refining of any potential flaws that are in there. If the instrument wasn't made, to withstand those things and some of the things you might not have considered in the first place.
Well, even the folks who don't make the same twice often enough, it's a matter of different ornamentation, that they don't repeat the exact same inlay pattern twice, but the basic structural design is likely to be fairly uniform, but not always.
I'm talking about guitar makers like Claudio and Claudio Pagelli or Thierry Andre or Michael Sankey. I don't know how familiar you are with their work. They literally really don't make even the same shape twice. And they move from electric to acoustic instruments to arch tops and all sorts of different things. And so they can be wonderful, but I certainly know that there are, not to speak poorly about any of those guitar makers, but I know that there are fail points that have happened where they have to get the instrument back and go, okay, so I missed something in what I was doing there. And that happens on the factory too, but usually long before it gets to the public, it's sorted out. They work through the prototyping stage of things. And so there's a cost-benefit analysis there, but I'm not really, I mean, we can discuss this, but I'm not really here to discuss that part of it.
Collections of custom instruments. Often it's even custom shop Fenders or custom shop Martins or custom shop Gibsons. So it's not necessarily always boutique builders. But even there, a lot of the bespoke instruments are not easy to resell. And even some makers where they can get literally $100,000 for a new guitar, try reselling it and see how far you get as a percentage of that, and it's usually not good.
Yeah, that can certainly be true.
I don't try to appraise collections of that kind, because so far as I'm concerned, on those you can get a letter from the luthier and you can give that to your insurance agent. I don't even want to try to appraise some of those, because to do appraisals, I need to have familiarity with the maker. I need to be able to look at other examples, supply, demand, and prior precedent. If there's not much prior precedent and not a strong demand except from his clientele, it's a very different market from vintage.
Yes. So I'm not really here
And
to
even the
discuss
term
that for that
vintage
reason.
these days, by the way, is a difficult term to apply. When I opened up my shop, January 1970, a 30-year-old guitar was January 1940.
Right.
It was radically different from a 1970 and extremely superior to the 1970. But even a 5-year-old guitar in 1970, that would be January of 1965. For the acoustics as well as the electrics, the difference between a January 65 and a January 1970 guitar was night and day different. And today, a lot of those 1965 mid-year and earlier in the year, those are highly collectible and viewed as vintage now. I think the term collectible is maybe more useful than the term vintage, because people keep asking, how old does one have to be vintage? 1975 to me is not vintage.
Right.
But it's 50 years.
Yeah.
And when I opened up my shop in January of 70, 50 years older would have been January of 1920.
Right.
And right now, I've been in business for 55 years and almost 10 months. We're at the end of September, about to enter October. And I opened January 2nd of 70. So something that's as old, that was as old in 1970 as the opening date of my shop was from today, well, we'd be talking about very early in the year. Well, we'd be back into 1915. So it's been a while. And there's been a heck of a lot of change since I opened my store, but not near as much change as perhaps there was earlier, because in 1915 there were no electric guitars. The F5 Gibson mandolin hadn't been invented. The master tone Gibson banjo hadn't been invented. Martin was still making gut string guitars rather than steel string. There were no dreadnought-sized guitars. It's no electric guitars for darn sure. In fact, there wasn't even commercial radio yet. Commercial radio goes back only to about 1920, 1915. Well, of course, it was in the midst of World War I. Radio existed, but it was for military purposes, communication. It didn't dawn on anybody that you could have a commercial radio station for entertainment yet. And they didn't have electronic recording even for doing phonograph records. It was mechanical. Vintage is almost a useless term now. Collectible is still a useful term. Some things are collectible and some are not. But then you get down to what kind of collectible? Collectible golden era? I like golden era as a term better than vintage.
I'm really here to talk about the impulse to collect. A number of years ago, you said to me that people aren't collecting anymore, and you said it with a tone of concern. You were like, people aren't collecting the way they used to. We don't have, young people aren't collecting.
Well, demographically, the market has changed.
Why does it concern you that people are not collecting? And what does collecting even mean to you?
If they're not collecting, or if their focus is changing radically, then things that used to be highly sought after may not be anymore. And we can look at things outside of guitars. For example,
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com.
Those glass globe lamps, kerosene oil, and before that whale oil lamps. And they had beautiful glass shades and glass globes. And even in 1980, some of those things were as much as $800. The very same ones today you'd be lucky to get $200 for, because the people who cared about them have died. And the younger generation doesn't give a bleep about them. The number of people even who are really into things like Model T Fords, not so much. You can still get parts for them, but very few people know how to drive one. The transmission system is completely alien. It's a whole different system. They don't have hydraulic brakes. You really can't take one out on the road and safely use it on today's roads. Certainly couldn't take it out on the interstate. The Model A that came out in 27 at least has a 3 on the column shift. I learned to drive, not on a Model A, but I learned to drive on a Plymouth. It was made in 1950, my mother's Plymouth, which was only 10 years old at the time, because I learned how to drive. I got my learner's permit in 1960. But I could still drive a Model A Ford and probably not have any great difficulty adapting to it. It had hydraulic brakes and it had a 3 on the column transmission. But with collecting, you can collect golden era pieces. You can collect boutique pieces that you buy brand new, or you can collect memorabilia. Totally different type of collecting. The people who collect memorabilia are not interested in the originality of the instrument except insofar as it's the way so-and-so had it. And Kurt Cobain's Martin D18E brought like $6.1 million. The guitar wasn't in particularly good condition. If it hadn't been his, it might be worth $3,000, $3,500 maybe, in that condition. But they don't care. They only care it was his.
That's right.
Or Stevie Ray Vaughan's Stratocaster, or Willie Nelson's guitar, which it's not going to ever be for sale. It's probably going to be somewhere in a Hall of Fame or whatever. But there are people who undoubtedly would probably pay $1 million for Willie Nelson's guitar, which if it wasn't his and it was in that condition, it would be almost worthless. If it's the same model and it was squeaky clean, one of those might now bring $6,000, partly because it's just like his, but in good condition, and it's Brazilian rosewood. But they only made that variation of the N20 for just 1969. But at any rate, memorabilia collectors are completely different from the people who collect custom limited edition models. And that's actually different from the boutique collectors. So there are different categories of collectors entirely. And the whole psychology and motivation is completely different. The people who buy boutique guitars are not generally the same ones who buy all the limited edition models. So there's some people who just have a big collection of limited edition models by major makers. There's others who collect only boutique, others who collect only Golden Age vintage, and sometimes only electric Golden Age or only acoustic Golden Age. So there are different categories of people.
Why do they specialize?
Well, they have different neuroses.
Okay. Expound on that. What do you mean by their different neuroses?
Well, when you get down to it, collecting does have a certain neurotic component, wanting to accumulate all that much stuff. Some of these people, me included, just aren't quite normal, middle of the road standard. My standard line about sanity is I believe it would be boring, but I am not sure, never having personally experienced it. But I do have a degree in psychology from the University of Chicago, which is mainly on animal behavior studies, but still, human psychology, we are mammals. And there's certain things that what motivates you to do all of this? You try to analyze what motivates people to do anything. Some things are as simple as you want to eat, or you have a strong sex drive or whatever that's motivational. But what motivates people to collect? They are beautiful art. They're interactive art. But does anybody really need to have 100 of them? Or 200 or 300, or some people have more than that. They obviously don't need that many to play. But it does make sense if you are a professional musician that you need more than one, because no one guitar does everything. And then you'll find that it's difficult enough. There's so many different kinds of guitars that, if you look around the room here, you can look at things like that row on top, solid body, mostly Fenders. They don't look anything like the ones below, which are Gibsons, and some of them are, well, they're not all Gibsons, but a Les Paul doesn't look like, and is structurally very different from a Fender. And the hollow body and semi-hollow guitars are completely different again. And looking around at the flat top guitars or arch top F-hole acoustics, they're so different that if you're tooled up to make one, you're not tooled up to make the other. But they have different sounds. And if you're a session player, you need to have a resonator guitar. You need to have a flat top steel string guitar. You need to have a nylon strung guitar. You need to have an arch top acoustic. You might want to have a hollow body electric or a semi-hollow electric, and you probably, if you're going to get into solid bodies, you really need something to do the Fender twang sound and something else to do more of the Gibson Les Paul type sound, which are very different sounds. And then if you're into electric 12-string, you might want that jangly Rickenbacker 12-string. But the point is, they're not interchangeable for sound. They're very different beasts. So, but that's not necessarily the same as collecting. You might have a dozen or more guitars if you're a session musician, but you're no more a collector than you are just because a plumber has 100 different wrenches and whatever, socket wrenches and other equipment. He's not a tool collector.
No.
There are some people who collect vintage tools, and they're historians. They're very interested in the history. And you can collect the way a museum curator would, where you want to have a comprehensive view of the whole history of a certain company, and including the major evolutionary steps that got them where they are today. And some of those may not be what most players are looking for, but they're still important instruments in the evolution of the company. So that's a completely different kind of collecting a museum curator would do, or a sophisticated collector of Martin or Gibson history. That's a different approach entirely. So there's a more scholarly approach. There's other folks who say they're collectors when in fact they're investors. They want to have as many as possible of only half a dozen different models, which are currently considered really hot items to have, that have bragging rights. So, and there are some folks who, while they claim they're collectors, they're only buying half a dozen different models, if even that many. Sometimes all they want is Carina model Gibsons, which there aren't very many of, original, or Sunburst Les Pauls, and that's all they want to collect.
Right.
To me, that gets down to they take picture after picture showing different grain patterns of the wood on the top. If you want different grain patterns of curly maple, you can go to a good lumber yard and you can buy large panels of it. And you can panel all the walls even, and you could even have a sunburst wall of maple and other colors. Instead of having mirrored ceilings and walls for your bedroom, you can just put curly maple. Whatever turns you on. But they get pissed off if I tell them that this one, and this one is the same thing, except they got different grain pattern. Yeah. Or you're collecting Fender guitars, and you want every custom color possible. Well, with Photoshop, you can take a picture of one, and you got a color chart. You can have pictures of all of them. Know exactly what they're going to play and sound exactly the same. They're going to feel the same. And if you close your eyes and play, there's no difference. If it's burgundy mist or seafoam green or sunburst, they're going to sound exactly the same. And curly maple, if it's a Les Paul, people go nuts over that. But if it's a Stradivari violin or a Joseph Del Gesù Guarneri violin, you know how much difference there is in the price between one with relatively plain grain and one with fancy curly grain?
I have no idea.
There's no difference. The buyers don't care.
Right.
They care who made it, what year, what is the general pattern of it, because these makers did evolve over time. And some of their very best ones are pretty late in their career. Would you rather have...
Is George still in the frame? Sorry. Should we ask the cat politely?
Oh, the kitty is definitely part of the interview.
No, okay. George is still... But it's not going to lock focus on the cat and take it off, George?
We don't want him to total focus.
No.
He's part of the ambiance here.
Yes.
This is his palace in which I'm the butler. And he knows that you guys are here to pay homage specifically to him, that he's the star. And he's preening for you.
Certainly making the star shake right now.
But,
Perfect.
but he knows that. And he's very gracious as the lord of the manor.
Yes.
And as long as I treat him well, he treats me well in return.
Wonderful. You have a really interesting way about you with guitars, George, because people associate you so much with desirable, collectible guitars. But you have this really strong pragmatic side to you about how you view the instrument and its performance. You know, I would even dare to say you're a bit blinkered because you have a very strong opinion on exactly what an instrument should or shouldn't do. And so can you help me find the balance between George being the person that supplies all of these collectors with the desirable instruments, and George the pragmatist that says things like,
Well, I
your
want an
different
instrument.
quilted Les Pauls or flame Les Pauls are akin to mirrors on your ceiling?
This space is normally reserved for brands who make stories like this possible, like the Dario and the Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop. If your company belongs in this conversation, let's talk. We partner with brands who value craft, culture, and the quiet power of a well-placed idea.
To me, first and foremost, an instrument should be designed so that it produces the best possible sound that a maker can achieve. And there are different styles of guitars, so that I'm not expecting a flat top and an arch top to sound the same, but there's a certain quintessential sound you might be looking for. And if it does not achieve a good sound, you can have gorgeous ornamentation and it would look great in a display case, but it's not a great instrument to play. Some of the people collecting boutique guitars are making and collecting instruments that are simply not designed to be played at all. I've seen some on display at NAMM shows where it's enormous amount of ornamentation, but it's totally impractical to actually play the thing.
Sure, that's possible.
That's okay if you want it as a piece of art for display,
Yeah.
but to me, it's a piece of sculpture rather than an instrument. It's a sculpture with a guitar theme, but it's still a sculpture. It wouldn't play well.
Right. But you say that with a level of condescension.
Well, I don't consider it to be a real guitar at that point.
But you collect vintage vases and other artifacts around here. You have not one, but at least two hippopotamus skulls that I've seen.
No, they have
Here-
no
here in
utility,
the
whatever.
hallway and such, right? And so
But
you're a collector of objects, or at least you're collector, is that the right word? How would you define it?
well, those are decor. I'm not a skull collector per se, but I do have a background in zoology. And so I find them interesting to look at, as well as I do understand what they are. The hippo skulls are quite interesting. If you look at the teeth, there's teeth for eating and there's teeth that are for offense and defense. And it tells you quite a bit about the kind of animal and why it's such a dangerous beastie, or why having that kind of a environment that it grows up in, sharing the rivers with crocodiles, as well as having a harem with a dominant male and all the females that he's defending the harem. That's what all those front teeth are about. They have nothing to do with feeding. They are strictly for defense and offense. The offense is primarily against other male hippos, and the defense is against mainly crocodiles, although also they're sharing the environment with lions. So lions know better than to mess with a hippo unless the hippo is young or senile old, or if there's a whole bunch of lions. But even lions don't like to take risks. If one gets injured, it's likely to die because it doesn't have a veterinarian to care for it or do surgery for it. Right. So they're careful about the fights they pick.
So I bring up one object and you follow with a substantially informed narrative. And so are all of the objects that you have collected around you all closely associated with a narrative and a curiosity?
They are.
Yeah.
Some of the bronze pieces I have are Meiji Dynasty Japanese. And they're things I find at antique shops and occasionally even at the flea market. But there's not very much turning up at the flea market now, but once in a while I find things. You know, 99.9% of the stuff at the flea market is just plain junk. But if you know what you're looking for, if 99.9% are junk, but there's 10,000 things there and you know the good ones when you see them, all you need to find is one.
Yes.
And it can be a wonderfully productive weekend at the flea market if you find one of the right piece.
Is that for your own acquisition, or do you resell something that you find that's very good?
Generally, I'm just keeping those.
Yeah.
I sell guitars. The other things are curiosities for me.
Yeah.
But with the guitars, I enjoy collecting some things that are more from the view of a museum curator. They're important evolutionary steps, and that you can learn from them. And sometimes you can learn a tremendous amount from an instrument that may not even be in good condition. Just like fossil collectors, there are some people who are wealthy and they want to have a T-Rex skeleton in their living room or wherever they have it in their home, and they'll pay a few $1 million to have it. But they're not really fossil collectors, because they're not studying them, they're not learning from them. They don't care very much even about where it came from. They just want a T-Rex skeleton that's good for display, but they're not worried about all the matrix it was found in. They're not worrying. Paleontologists these days are going to be examining all the plants right down to the pollen.
Would you say that like it's a zero-sum conversation? Like, unless you're interested in studying it, that you're not a collector?
If you just have a T-Rex skeleton or a few other things like that, I think that what they're doing is that they have some things they have a small number of things that they have in their house that give bragging rights. And there's a degree of that for musical instruments too. But again, the psychology behind the museum type curator versus the player who wants super good playing instruments and has a fair collection of really nice ones, that can still be, like Vince Gill has at least 350 guitars, and I would consider him to be a collector. But he still wants things that play well. And he has a few things that are just historically interesting, but frankly not many. But he has a wide variety of different types of guitars that he can do almost anything with. But it's a very different psychology collecting only new boutique, primarily bespoke, especially for you. There are people who don't want used guitars at all. They want only boutique, and they want only guitars made for them personally. If it was made for somebody else, in fact, I've had some people tell me that if somebody else were to play my guitar, it would get bad vibes in it. They got psychological issues. And they're entitled to do what they want. It's their money. They can do what they want. But they're certainly not buying it with the intention of resale anyway, because they only want bespoke guitars. They don't even want a guitar by the same maker that was made for somebody else.
Well, why would you buy something with the intention of resale? I mean, that's simply a financial transaction at that point in time.
There's a lot of people who do buy with that exact thing because they're actually investing. It's people, for example, who say they're art collectors, but it all goes straight into a vault. Or it gets loaned to a museum because the insurance is so expensive, it's cheaper to loan it to the museum and have it on loan so you can get it back if you want it. But in the meantime, they pay the insurance and they display it. And it helps to sell it later if you want to, because you can say it was at the Metropolitan, whatever. And people do that. And sometimes they even put together group consortiums, just like gold shares. You can buy shares in a gold mine, but you're not even getting actual gold. You're getting a certificate. Or there's people trying to put together some guitar collection like that, and to me, so far that's not taking off very well. I think most people, if they don't have a lot of money, they'd rather have 100% ownership of an ES-125 than a very, very tiny share of a Sunburst Les Paul that they don't get to play.
Right.
They can't touch it. They don't get to see it. They don't decide when to buy one, how much to pay for it, when to sell it. And the only ones making money on that are the people running the scheme, because somebody gets paid a commission for doing every bit of that. But there are other people who have, they've amassed collections very much with the thought of resale. They enjoy having them, but they also, at some point, want to sell them. They keep it until maybe they get to age 70 or 80, depending on how they feel. I just turned 80 August 21st, but I don't especially feel old. Just sitting here, not looking in a mirror, I don't know how old I would be. If it weren't for mirrors, in my mind, I don't feel all that much different than I did at age 45.
No. All that's a narrative, right? I
But
mean, money is a
the
narrative.
40-pound sacks
Value
of
is a
kitty
narrative.
litter way more now than they used to. I've noticed that.
Yes.
It said 40 on them before, but they were easier to lift back then. They put in denser clay now. I've noticed that.
Sure.
But my vision, like
Climate's changing.
my vision, like I from here I can see every individual hair on your head as distinct individual hairs. So my vision is clear.
Yeah.
I can see the texture
You're making
of
me
the fabric
self-conscious,
on your
George.
shirt.
Does my hair look okay? Is it all right?
Yeah, it's good.
Am I unkempt?
Yeah, but mine looks better with a hat on.
I'd like to get back to that narrative for a second. When we talked about you, and I feel if we walked around here and pointed to anything, you would tell me a story on its purpose and its history and why it's here. And I think that's one of the key reasons that people collect things, is they're attached to a particular narrative with it. And I think it's correct of you to define the different categorizations of why people collect and what it is. You know, for someone who works directly with guitar makers a great deal, a lot of the guitars that I work with, and remember, I work with an extremely small niche of even boutique guitar makers. You know, I'm looking for things that are literally contributing something to the conversation. If they don't, they can't be a part of what we do. But that's not really the point of the topic here. That point is about narrative. The point is about, even guitar makers have ideas that they want to explore and express through their craft to build out something. Some people are making strictly a utility object, and they could be making, I mean, if you want to treat it that way, you could be making a lawn chair, you know, you could be making a sofa, a car, or anything else. If we're just looking at utility, you know, I don't know how much time you spent in the Soviet era of the Eastern Bloc, but when I walk around Soviet era construction that was strictly, or that was simply utilitarian, it was gray and depressing.
Yeah,
You know, there's a role for
that's
beauty.
true, but there is a difference. The guitar, a really good guitar, feels and almost looks alive. It has soul and personality, so that when you play one, the difference between a really great player guitar, truly superb one, and an average one is that the average one may feel like a reasonably good utility tool, and it may do most of what you ask it to do. But the really great ones do more. They make suggestions. They have soul and personality. When you pick one up, it feels alive. And it sort of tends to be a partner rather than simply a tool. It's not only a totally obedient slave or inanimate. It feels alive. There are some things it really wants to do, and it may take you off, and you start composing new tunes that you would not have otherwise. It'll change your playing style. something like when Bill Monroe got his F5 mandolin, his entire style of playing completely changed.
Right.
And it was, bluegrass would never have happened had it not been for the F5 mandolin. But the F5 was designed for classical. And none of the classical players like William Place Jr. or Walter K. Bauer, Lloyd Lohr, although we don't really know what Lloyd sounded like. There's not a single recording of him.
Right.
And it's also Lloyd, the evidence is that Lloyd Lohr didn't really even design the F5, he just signed the labels. He didn't have that much input. It was a team effort. But regardless, the F5 mandolin and numerous other instruments are used for things that the original makers never dreamed of.
As a guitar builder and a player, you have a sense for when something's working right. That's why so many of the world's best trust D'Addario. Unmatched tone, perfect intonation, and strings made to the tightest tolerances in the industry. That reputation is no accident. It's the result of 400 years of being obsessed with quality and innovation. D'Addario. When you know, you know.
Leo Fender never envisioned anybody like James Burton. He may have understood Buck Owens a bit, but he sure as hell didn't understand folks like James Burton or Stevie Ray Vaughan or Jimi Hendrix. All the guitars shipped out while Leo was in charge of Fender had heavy flat wound strings. And all of his guitars had those clip-on metal bridge covers, which the first thing a player does is take those things off. They're in the way. Even the basses had those metal guards. Players take those off right away. But he never in his lifetime did it figure that to him that he should not just redesign the things so that it didn't need those clip-on things, or the bridges were designed where you could clip onto it. They had extra lip to them that was not needed, actually physically in the way a bit. But the great instruments are the ones that actually have become collectible, were essentially really, really good instruments. And part of what got collecting started was really didn't happen much before my generation. The quality of the instruments back in the 1920s and 30s was evolving rapidly. The designs were evolving rapidly, and there were not a bunch of people collecting guitars. Because for one thing, the best of them were the newest ones. And if you were looking at by the decade, in 1910, a Martin guitar, they were all gut string. They were all 12 fret. And they were basically designed for playing classical. By 1920, Hawaiian music was coming around, and Martin was making some Hawaiians, but still, mostly still gut string. By 1930, things had changed radically. Almost everything Martin made was for steel strings, and 14 fret necks were not still the norm on everything, but the OM-28 came out with a 14 fret neck in 1929, but late in the year, and Martin talks about what a great innovation that was. It was total nonsense. You can look at things like there's a Gibson style O that has a 15 fret neck. That model came out in 1910. And Perry Bechtel, who they made the first OM for, was perfectly well aware that the Gibson L5 model had a 14 fret neck from the very first.
Right.
So, you know, Martin doesn't bother mentioning any of that in their literature. But the other thing that really changed things for Martin in the 20s was something happened that caused the demand for gut string Martins to just vanish. they'd been making gut strings from the very beginning, all the way, and then in the mid-20s, that market for them collapsed. And it's not that classical guitar became unpopular. It's that Segovia toured the US, and he played a different style technique that was really viewed by most as superior. And he played Torres design Spanish classicals. And later he got Hauser, but the Hauser, that was actually into the 30s when he got that. In the 20s, he was still playing Spanish guitars with Torres basic design. It killed the demand for Martin gut string guitars. Martin had to adapt, and they couldn't adapt by copying Torres design because it's a totally different style construction, and without an endorsement from Segovia, who would never have endorsed a Martin anything that he'd ever make. That would be an exercise in frustration and futility. So they just switched to making steel string guitars, for which there was a market. Plus they made a lot of ukuleles, so they survived. But had it not been for Segovia, it's hard to say what it would have done. But again, what makes the old ones, what started collecting really came in when the quality of new ones went down. And the old ones were much, much better, visibly and in sound and feel in every way. The old ones were much better. That caused people to start switching from playing new ones to old ones. With one of the first ones to be playing old electric guitars would have been Mike Bloomfield. He was not a collector, he was a player. But he started playing a early 60s Tele, then he switched to a 54 Les Paul, then he switched to a Sunburst 59 Les Paul, and more than any other one person, he caused white boys to want to play R&B on old guitars rather than new ones, because the old ones sounded and played so much better. If they weren't really good, they wouldn't be collectible. So at the root of it, the old ones, collecting started when the old ones were visibly and sonically and even in feel playing it totally superior to anything that was available new. The late 60s through the 70s.
True, but that doesn't ring true with the Bloomfield story.
With which story?
So, because I interviewed Dan Earlywine not so long ago on this, who you know is intertwined in that story, and he, like you said, he was playing a Telecaster because he was a Bloomfield fan who's coming through, and Bloomfield came through with a gold top, and he went out to go get a Les Paul that had been hanging in a store for 2 years, a 59, the one that Bloomfield eventually ends up with, that nobody wanted that damn guitar, and it was very cheap. It was undesirable. Yeah, it came later on that they wanted that guitar.
It came as soon as he got one.
Yeah.
I knew Bloomfield pretty well. And I think he was extremely influential. But when he played a Tele, nobody was looking for Les Pauls. When he played a 54 Les Paul, nobody was looking for Sunburst Les Pauls. When he played a Sunburst Les Paul, everybody wanted.
Earlywine only bought that because that was the only Les Paul he could get. He couldn't get the one that Bloomfield had. There was a Burst in the store.
Well, the fact is, Bloomfield was looking for a Burst and came to me asking if I could find him one, but he found that Earlywine had one and he got it. But Bloomfield knew what he wanted. He did want a Burst, not because of the look, but because of the sound that would give him. And the people who told me, when Bloomfield was playing on a 54, occasionally I would find a Burst, and I said, well, that's the wrong thing. That tunematic bridge doesn't give you good sustain, And the humbucking pickups are kind of syrupy, sickly, sweet sounding. They don't have the bite like those good P90s. And 2 weeks after Bloomfield had a burst, these same people couldn't remember ever having said any such thing, and they were stripping the gold finish off their gold tops and routing it for humbuckers. But Bloomfield was influential. Without Bloomfield, I don't know that Gibson would have ever even reissued the Les Paul. But when they did reissue it, they didn't listen to people for what they really wanted. They came out with what Les Paul said to do, which was a gold top and a black custom. But how many people do you know who play Les Paul style music on a Les Paul? Or play it on anything? Not many.
No.
And Les also
I talk about this at every
customized
single
everything he
event
got.
I do. Yeah, because it's actually proof to me that most guitars that are made are not made for they don't find success with the intended audience. It's usually an unintended consequence that happens. It happened with the F5, it happened with the Les Paul, it happened with the Stratocaster and Telecaster over and over
With
again.
the Master Tone banjo
Those
as
are
well.
all instruments that the musicians decide what happens, and that the instruments of the day, the musicians of the day, generally reject it. It doesn't sound of the music they made, it doesn't play the same way, and it generally takes a young generation to sort of say, this makes me do something I didn't previously do. It inspires me, and we generate new music from these new instruments, which is what I find most fascinating about new instruments. I'm not particularly interested in doing a cultural reenactment. And I have no problem with that. I know that most of the market, and much of the market that you work with, to me, is cosplay. It's reenacting a past era, the same as classical music or folk.
Well, the fact is, though, that the F5 was designed very, very well so that it could do sounds that no mandolin had ever done before.
Was that intentional, or was that actually poor design?
It was not poor design because it worked well for classical too.
Did it?
It absolutely did.
So why didn't they take it up?
It didn't take up because the whole mandolin orchestra boom died.
Do you see classical players playing F5s now?
Yes, some do, but there aren't very many classical players. The number of classical mandolin players is very limited, and the F5 does work extremely well as a solo instrument where you have a soloist who needs to cut through a backup group. So if you want to have, it's just like a Del Gesù Guarneri is not a violin for a second violin section. It's a violin for a soloist who's going to be in front of an orchestra and be playing a solo with no wire coming out the end pin and no microphone in front of him, but you can hear him at the top of the balcony. You don't want that in the second violin section. You want that for the soloist. And the F5 was beautifully designed for that, and it just happened that it worked for Monroe. He discovered new sounds in it. And he changed music history because he found that instrument. And after that, now everybody wants to make mandolins that do work for bluegrass.
Don't you think that's an unintended consequence and not just brilliant design from the beginning?
No, it was brilliant design from the beginning.
You think they saw the future of bluegrass when they made that
instrument? Of course they didn't see that. But they were trying to make the ultimate classical the ultimate mandolin for classical, and it happened that it also would be an ultimate mandolin for bluegrass, but bluegrass didn't exist yet.
So you chop it up to just bad timing.
The timing was terrible. It's just like the timing was terrible for the Flying V and the Explorer. People were not ready to accept that kind of a goofy look yet. But for things like the Broadcaster Fender, and later followed by the Tele, that caught on quick. It was commercially successful from the very beginning. Now, what they did on it later changed, but it was an excellent design. They sound great, they play well, and it would do things that you could not do on a standard previous design guitar. And it was immediately successful, just like the precision bass was immediately successful. But when Leo Fender came out with those, he also put a lot of musicians out of work because it killed the big band era. Because think about it, the big band era died. It started dramatically in the early 50s, and even by the mid 50s, the big band era was essentially over. Why?
I'm not a historian. If I had to guess, I would say that a big band, just by definition, is a lot of people, which is expensive.
Yeah.
And we move towards a practical solution of having fewer people fill the room. And if the customer was just as happy to hear 3 or 4 musicians, the venue would rather pay 3 or 4 musicians than 10 or 30.
You hit it exactly right.
Yeah. For the same reason the DJ caused a problem in the late 70s and early 80s.
Right. And there are certain things technologically that change. But now Leo did something else besides making solid body guitars and solid body basses. He made another thing that they needed.
The amplifier. Very important.
Leo Fender was the first one that made amps that would kick ass.
Right.
And those instruments were very well designed, and they were successful immediately. But the F5 mandolin failed because, one, the classical mandolin boom died, and bluegrass didn't yet exist, and country musicians were not likely to go out and buy an F5 in 1924. In 1923 and 24, the F5 was $250 plus $25 for the case, $275. In 1924, what did a Model T cost?
Roughly the same thing.
$300.
Yeah.
So if you were going to buy the L5 guitar, it was $275 plus $25.50 for the case, $300.50,
Yeah.
50 cents more than a Model T.
Yeah. It's the criticism people come when they come
The
to
number
a
of
boutique guitar
hillbillies who would
showcase all the
buy
time.
those would be 0.
Right.
And
I get the same comments today, George. People say, that's as much as my car. I say, well, that may be true, but that's the
Well-
price of that guitar also.
the vintage instruments that are collectible happen to be really good. If they weren't really good, they wouldn't be collectible. And people
Well, they're
wouldn't
good
have
for certain
started
things.
They're
They're good for
if
an
the new ones
objective.
were every bit as good or better.
Yeah, I've said that 3 times. You ignored it every time. They're good for an object. Good. I mean, so there's a point in time where you want to wax poetic, and there's a point where you want to be a scientist. And when we're talking about good, we have to define the objective before we can say it is good at achieving the objective or not. And there are styles of music which certain instruments are just not suited for. And therefore, you have to say that it is good within a context, right? And so there are people who want to play certain things, and you have a sound in your head and you want to recreate that. There are other people who want to do things and they can't find an instrument that produces the sound, and they're pushing the limits of that. And that's what we saw in the late 1970s with Eddie Van Halen cutting up his damn guitar and taking parts from this and jamming it in because he couldn't get the sound that was in his head. And that's sort of the forward momentum of music that doesn't yet exist. And they're 2 different inspirations, right? But you have to define the objective. And I don't think that we can just say that this is the ultimate guitar, that one is the best. We can say it's best to achieve a particular goal. Would you agree with that?
Up to a point.
You've been listening to Life with Strings Attached. If today's conversation meant something to you, consider passing it on. These stories find their place through the people who share them. A new episode comes out every Friday, right here, wherever you're listening. I'm Jamie Gale, and thanks for listening to Life with Strings Attached.